In April of 1945, Hitler moved into the Fuhrer bunker, located 50 feet below the Chancellery buildings in Berlin. In this underground complex containing nearly 30 rooms on 2 separate floors, Hitler held daily briefings with his generals amid reports of unstoppable Soviet advance into Berlin. Fuhrer bunker nearly means shelter for the leader, and this is where Hitler and his wife Eva Braun spent the last few weeks of the war and eventually where their lives came to an end. From this bunker, Hitler issued frantic orders to defend Berlin with armies that were already wiped out or were making a hasty retreat westward to surrender to the Americans. On April 22nd, during a 3-hour military conference in the bunker, Hitler let loose a hysterical, streaking denunciation of the army and the universal treason, corruption, lies, and failures of all those who had deserted him. The end had come, Hitler exclaimed. His Reich was a failure, and now there was nothing left for him to do but to stay in Berlin and to fight to the very end. The next day, April 26th, Soviet artillery fire made the first direct hits on the Chancellery buildings and grounds directly above the Fuhrer bunker. That evening, a small plane containing female test pilot Hannah Reitz and Luftwaffe General Ritter von Grimm landed in the street near the bunker, following a daring fight in which Grimm had been wounded in the foot by Soviet ground fire. Once inside the Fuhrer bunker, the wounded Grimm was informed by Hitler he was going to be Hermann Grog's successor, the man who had committed treason. On the night of April 27th, Soviet bombardment of the Chancellery buildings reached its peak with numerous direct hits. Hitler sent frantic telegrams to Ketzel demanding Berlin be relieved by now the non-existing armies. Many historians believe that all the stress put on Hitler, starting from April 22nd, had caused a nervous breakdown which later led to his suicide. He expressed his intent to kill himself and later asked physician Werner Haas to recommend a reliable method of suicide. Haas suggested combining a dose of cyanide with a gunshot to the head. Meanwhile, Hitler learned of Heinrich Himmler's attempt to independently negotiate a peace treaty. Hitler considered this treason and began to show signs of paranoia, expressing worries the cyanide capsules he had received through Himmler's SS were fake. He also learned of the execution of his ally Benito Mussolini and vowed not to share the same fate. After midnight on April 29th, Hitler married Eva Braun in a small civil ceremony in a map room within the bunker complex. Anthony Beevor stated that after Hitler hosted a modest wedding breakfast with his new wife, Hitler took Secretary Charles Junge to another room and dictated his last will and testament. He signed these documents at 4 o'clock and retired to bed. Hitler and Braun lived together as husband and wife in the bunker for fewer than 40 hours. Late in the morning of April 30th, with Soviets very close to the bunker, Hitler had a meeting with General Helmuth Welding, commander of the Berlin defense area, who informed Hitler the Berlin garrison would probably run out of ammunition that night. Welding asked Hitler for permission to break out, a request he had made unsuccessfully before. Hitler did not answer at first, and Welding went back to his headquarters in the Bender block, where at about 1 o'clock he got Hitler's permission to try to break out that night. Hitler, 2 secretaries, and his personal cook then had lunch, after which Hitler and Eva Braun said their personal farewells to members of the Fuhrer bunker staff and fellow occupants, including the Goebbels family, Martin Bormann, the secretaries, and several military officers. At around 2:30, Adolf and Eva Hitler went into Hitler's personal study. Several moments later, a gunshot was heard. After waiting a few moments, at 3:30 p.m., Bormann and Goebbels entered and found the body of Hitler sprawled out on the sofa, dripping with blood from a gunshot to his right temple. Eva Braun had died from swallowing poison. The bodies were carried up to the Chancellery garden, doused with gasoline, and burned, while Bormann and Goebbels stood by and gave a final Nazi salute. Over the next 3 hours, the bodies were repeatedly doused with gasoline. The charred remains were then swept into a canvas, placed into a shell crater, and buried. Back inside the bunker, with the Fuhrer now gone, everyone began smoking, a practice Hitler had generally forbidden in his presence. They next began collectively plotting daring escapes out of Berlin to avoid capture by the Soviets. On the following day, May 1st, Goebbels and his wife proceeded to poison their 6 young children in the bunker. They went up into the Chancellery Garden, where they were shot in the back of the head at their request by an SS man. Their bodies were then burned, but they were only partially destroyed and were not buried. Their remains were discovered by Soviets the next day and filmed, the charred body of the Goebbels becoming an often seen image symbolizing the legacy of Hitler's Reich. Hitler will forever be known for the destruction he caused throughout Germany, and his name will forever be held in infamy.